Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to Waterfed Wednesday. This is where we get to go beyond the bucket and dive into the world of waterfed cleaning to answer questions about our equipment, our business, and our goal of helping cleaners like you worldwide get the job done faster, safer, and better. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sean.
All right. Well, we are the hosts of your Waterfed Wednesdays, and this week we're going to talk about our topic would be: Are your systems ready for the season? So we look forward about chatting about that. See, people are still logging in, checking us out. As always, get on the comments and say where you're checking in from, maybe how the weather is. Right now, we're in preparation of maybe having what 2 feet, 3 feet.
Depends on
I
who
don't
you
know.
ask.
Yeah,
A lot. We
a
will
lot of
be
snow.
somewhat closed tomorrow as a result. It's going to get
Yeah,
buried.
yes, and there's also the possibility of maybe a dusting. We'll see. We'll see.
Cancel all your jobs. Oh, it didn't rain, actually. Oh, no big deal.
Hey, shout out to Jamie. Not sure if you're on today, but Jamie Hallman. Congratulations to you on winning the Ultimate Residential Kit. I already see you got it out pretty fast and already unboxing it. So look forward to seeing your thoughts on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats, Jamie. He already got it, huh? That
Yeah.
contest just ended the other day.
Yeah.
That's
He
great.
went
Team
out
is
Friday,
team is
got it
firing
Monday.
on all cylinders.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into this. Are your systems ready for the season? So, as we mentioned, if you're just joining in, this week's topic is filter maintenance. Filters are really the most important elements of ensuring pure water cleaning. So, are your systems ready? So, we'll go over some common questions and feel free to chime in with any filter related questions you may have. So, we'll go ahead and get it started while we look at comments that are coming in. But one of the things it's common is people getting ready, thawed out from winter. Question I used to get a lot: I'm getting my system out of storage and I used RO preservative. How should I get my system ready for use? What are your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, so the RO preservative is basically a product that we offer where if you're not familiar with it, it's for long term storage over winter months, and you basically simple process. It comes in a little bag. It's powder. You pour it into a gallon of pure water. You drain your RO membrane. Put your plug back in the bottom so the housing will hold water again. You pour that gallon in there, and it preserves the membrane over the winter so that it doesn't foul up and build up bacteria that can prematurely cause the membrane to fail. And so in the spring, when you're breaking that out and you're getting it ready to roll again, you basically just want to go into a flush mode. I would say for at least a half an hour. Put your pre filters back in. Don't put your DI in yet, but hook up to a water supply. Flush it for about a half an hour. That'll get all that preservative out of there. Because remember, it was a powder, so it's kind of
Yeah.
granular. It's probably caked up in some of that area, depending on how well you mixed it to begin with. And then go into a production mode for 5-10 minutes. Making RO water is obviously pretty inexpensive with the life of the membranes, so do both of those, and you should be good to go. And yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of trying to get all that out of your system, and then you can go ahead and reinstall that DI post filter.
Cool. Cool. Checking up on our comments. We got Jason chiming in on our Facebook group. He says, "Love my Tucker Roadie system." I'm not sure if you recall, but he was a winner of a kit back in, I think, the Huge. Uh,
Oh, very
Correct
cool.
me if I'm wrong, but I remember he tried in 2022. We had a giveaway, put your cards in a fishbowl, and he was a close one on 2022, and we pulled out his card 2023 in
Oh yeah,
Nashville.
very cool. I remember the photo. That was a good photo.
Yeah. Let's see. Plug it into the tap, and it sprays out money. Uh, that's
Nice.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Florida's Florida's slammed right now, right? So it's not so much winter there, but most of the country, like we said, we're getting a lot of snow tomorrow. So
Yeah.
yeah, Florida's the hot spot at the moment for sure.
Trade. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Over on Instagram, I believe that's my eyes are starting to fail me. Ranhel panel cleaning, or some guys might call it, say, Wrangle. Ranhel panel cleaning on Insta. Hey guys, hey back. All right, let's get back into some of these other common questions. This is a very common question. It's either at the start of the year or when guys are looking at investing in buying a system. How long do my filters last? This is a common question, but it can get pretty in depth. How about
Yeah,
that one?
yeah, it really depends. You've got if we break it down, pre-filtration, RO membranes, DI, right?
Yeah.
So pre-filters are all rated. You can get that information from the manufacturer. Most of those 2.5 by 10 small filters that are used in like the rival systems, they're rated for about 5,000 gallons. Most guys that I've run into over the years really don't track that.
Mhm.
And we'll have people that come in and say, I've had this for X number of years and I've never done anything. Right. So, the manufacturer rating is 5,000 gallons on that size. And, we went to clear housings a couple years back to kind of make it a little more obvious to
Yeah.
people that the filter is getting trashed, right? When you had that white housing you couldn't see through, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But now it's something people look at and they go, okay, well, yeah, that's obviously getting dirty, and it's a little more front of mind for them from a maintenance standpoint. So that number is really right there and dialed in from the manufacturer of the pre-filters. The ABS filters, like let's say that we manufacture on the 4060, the H2 Pro, those carbon sediment filters are rated more like 80 to 100,000 gallons. So, I used to tell people once a season, you swap that out, right? I mean, that's a lot of water.
Yeah.
RO membranes, it's always a hot topic because what we used to tell people was 2 to 4 years. And it was really a good kind of average, but there is no number of gallons. It's all environmental, right? Whereas pre-filters, the carbon filters taking out chlorine or chloramines. And so what we started to run into a few years ago was RO membranes failing prematurely. And when we trace that back, well, I say prematurely to our expectations, right? The manufacturers really don't give you any sort of guidelines as to how long these things will last. But, you get guys that say this only lasts a year, and then the next guy will say, the same area, it lasts me 7 years. So what happened, right? You might have went to a job site where there was hot water and it delaminated something. You might have ran into a water softener or some other pre-treated thing that wasn't ideal for RO membranes. And so it can be all over the place. But one of the key things that people should be aware of when it comes to pre-filters and RO membrane life is the lower cost carbon filters, right? You can get them for 10, 12, 15 bucks, maybe 20 some dollars. I could be off on the number, but they're relatively inexpensive, right? And so when you use those, they're good at capturing chlorine. But a lot of municipalities are using chloramines now, and chloramines are like ammonia based water treatment, right? So the chlorine filter doesn't grab that. So you have to go to catalytic carbon, and they're much more expensive, but they do the job. But if you're not using a catalytic carbon filter and you go into an area with chloramines, now your RO is getting affected, right? If you don't use a preservative over the winter and you don't bother to run water through it every week to 2 weeks, you're going to run into issues as well in terms of how well it can do. So the RO membrane life is all over the place, but it's a bit like, if you don't change the oil on your engine, you're not going to get anywhere near what the guy doing the maintenance on his car is going to get out of it, right? So you just want to do the pre-filter changes at the interval, and generally speaking, you're going to get several years out of an RO membrane. DI is obviously all over the place, right? If you're in an area where your incoming TDS is, say, 300, and your RO is able to get it down to 30 or a little less, which is pretty typical under tap water pressure, that's going to last 3 times as long as a guy who's in an area with 900.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just math, but I mean, it's wherever you are and how big the DI vessel is and that kind of stuff. So the DI is the biggest variable. It's like, how long will this last me? Generally speaking, under normal use, we see a lot of people get, a month out of that blue and white filter. That's the smallest filter on any system. Again, the biggest filters you can get are going to be on our H2 Pro or the 4060 by volume. They just hold more than anything else because we make them for our industry. So it's kind of all over the place, but there is a number that you can dial in. If you called in and you said, I'm normally dealing with 300. Okay, well, the RO is going to get it to, let's say, 30. We can do the math based on what filters in your system. So if you ever want to really dial that in, feel free to give us a call.
Yeah. And, there's other factors too to consider. So if you have a dual RO system, you're producing more water, so you're pushing more water through your DI. Do you have a booster pump? Are you at a higher operating pressure? That's more water going into your DI again. So a lot of things to consider when how long those filters last, especially your DI.
Yeah.
In line with that, and you kind of alluded to the clear housing, kind of check that out. But another question that goes with that is, how can I tell it's time to change my filters?
Yeah.
Just
yeah. So, I mean, if you wanted to kind of, test whether or not your carbon filter had gone bad, right? I mean, you're trying to remove chlorine and chloramines. So you could go out and get a simple, test kit for a hot tub or a pool. And if you check your water coming out of your system and you have any chlorine in the water, well, your carbon filter's gone bad, right? When it comes to RO membranes, basically what you want to do, well, let's back up. So that's a carbon or a chloramine filter. A sediment filter is going to clog. That might be a sign that less flow might be a sign that you have a clogged sediment filter. If your system has a sediment filter, if you've got a combo sediment carbon filter like we came out with a couple years back, less diminished flow is going to be a sign of that. So open your housing, pull your pre-filter, put it back together without it, and run it for a second. And if the flow is a lot higher, well, your filter is what is obstructing the flow. So it's probably time to replace that.
Yeah.
That's an easy one, right? A lot of guys call in, I'm getting less flow. Okay, pull it, see what happens. The RO membrane, you want to test that and get 90+% removal from the incoming TDS, like I alluded to. So you can do that test every once in a while. And normally when that will come up is somebody will feel like their DI filters are not lasting nearly as long, right? It's like, well, the last one I got a month out of, and this one I only got 2 weeks out of. Well, if your membrane is only operating at 80% all of a sudden rather than 90, you're going to get half the life out of the DI filter. So you can check that just by isolating the output of the RO filter and seeing what that's putting out compared to the incoming. But as a general rule, you want 90% removal or so. The DI itself, obviously, you can check it with a meter. You can look for spotting, any of those things. But when to change the DI is kind of a controversial question, depending on who you ask, and depending on the industry, right?
Yeah.
So when I was in the field, anything 10 and above, I would just change it out. And a lot of people will say, well, you can get to 20, you can get to 30, you can get to 40. The auto detail industry uses 40. But that's not sight glass. You're not looking through it. There's really like not a lot of good ways to see those minerals compared to on glass. So, but anything around 10 or more, we generally tell people to swap the DI filter out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common question I get about the DI in the 10 parts per million. It's like, how can you really tell if it's spotting because of the DI or so, or not? I'll get some guys would constantly be checking their DI. And when I was out in the field cleaning, I just let mostly my eyes do kind of the testing. If I see that it's spotting, I go back, check if those oxidized frames, see if it was more of a technique problem. I'll do it perfectly, and if it spots up again, then I'm like, okay, it's got to be the DI. Oh, sure enough, it's high. Then because you don't want to constantly be in fear of is my DI bad, and you're just constantly checking. So the 10 parts per million is a good safe threshold there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Let's check back in our comments. Perfect Glass on Instagram. My DI tank has been stuck in the basement for about 4 months. What do I do? I think you just gotta
Yeah.
one check it.
Yeah. Well, and if it's just a DI tank
Yeah.
and you're talking about, just a mixed bed DI tank, those fiberglass tanks with a big inlet, big outlet, I think you're good to go. I
Yeah.
mean, that DI resin is in water, right? So if the tank is about probably 4 or 5 inches below where the tank opens is the DI resin level, most likely, depending on where you got the resin from and all that kind of stuff. But that's probably about where the resin level is. And then the water level is generally higher than that because the lid's
Yeah.
much higher. So it's all underwater. That shouldn't be an issue at all. I've got a DI tank, a half cubic DI tank that I keep in my garage that, next time I go to it 6 months later, it's still spitting out pure water because that's not a concern with those. The issue really comes in with RO membranes when it comes to storage and how to deal with those over long periods of time.
Yeah. With DI, I think sometimes people might have the concern about a shelf life because unused, there's certainly that aspect. You do have a shelf life of it. But once it's wet, I mean, I've known guys in uh, Atlanta in the Georgia area where they have some really good water, just kind of like some areas over here. And yeah, they'll had, I think one guy's like, "Hey, I'm starting to get spotting on my windows. What's going on? I haven't had this happen to me in 4 years of owning the system." Well, finally, after 4 years, the DI went out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's areas in the country that probably out of the ground they really don't even need the system at all.
Yeah.
They're really lucky, but yeah, for sure. There's folks that get a lot of life out of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me go back here. Scroll up, see if I'm missing anything. Robert Wynn is chiming in on Facebook. How many gallons can I go all commercial buildings? I'm not sure. In reference to, do you get it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure what he's asking. Maybe how many gallons per minute out of the brush? I'm not really sure.
Chime back in, Robert.
Yeah, clarify. Let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Think this is with a check. Some of our comments, we can't see comments from Instagram. Thankfully, we have someone in the back end. Thanks, Nick, for helping us out to clarify these comments and where they're coming from. So if you're on our Facebook group page, not our business page, you have to grant access for us to see who is chiming in there. But okay, it looks like Craig over on our Facebook group. He's got a
Looks like
opinion.
he's been pushing membranes to the limit. I love
Yes.
Craig. Craig's
Yeah.
an old school Tucker guy. I've had a number of conversations with him about old school stuff. Love his spirit. Yeah, I mean, 2 membranes froze over the winter, just cranked him up as he thawed out and he was ready to roll. It's interesting. Not something we would advise, but there was a time when I was in the field when I had a DIY system in my van that had a holding tank, and a couple of days ago it was like 70 degrees here, right?
Yeah.
And tomorrow it's going to freeze and it's going to be snowy and we'll be cold for a little while and then it'll warm back up.
Yeah.
Well, what would happen to me is the same kind of thing, right? If you've got a couple issues at play here, right? The biggest thing you don't want to allow happen in regards to freezing is your housings to bust, right? So stainless housings, it's a little less likely. But what will happen on those is the ends will still crack.
Yep.
So we had a skid mount system out with a customer that sent it back to us for refurbishment, that the whole thing froze. Now that uses 4 stainless housings. There's no plastic pre-filter housings or post-filter. So nothing cracked on the stainless, but all the ends where the fittings are threaded in, they all cracked, right? Because of expansion. So that's the biggest issue with freezing. But if you look at the way an RO membrane is manufactured, it's tightly wound around a plastic, maybe 1-inch tube, right? And so what happens internally there when the water expands and turns to ice is it pushes all that wrapped material apart and just puts pressure on it. So it's obviously not ideal. But when I had my DIY system when I was in the field, it would freeze on a night going into a situation like this here locally, and it'd be like 3-4 days, and the 100 gallons would be solid block. And then it would, I'd throw a heater in there and I'd get it to thaw out and I'd go clean windows, right? I mean, when we touch on best practices, it's kind of like, don't do what we did. This is kind of advice from a best practice standpoint, but we certainly push some things to the limit in the field as well. But the biggest issue with freezing is definitely all these plastic components just shattering, and there's tons of people that come to us every year with cracked housings.
Yeah. I kind of, I don't know if this is a little off topic here, but something we also have to address um, about, and he mentioned about warranty on membranes. Is that something you can kind of talk about? We offer a 10-year warranty on our systems.
Yeah.
What does that cover in membranes specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we're a system manufacturer. Some filters we make, right? All the stuff in the 4060s and in the H2 Pros are DI systems, the single tube systems. We make those filters. But membrane technology, I mean, we're not a membrane manufacturer, right? And so we buy those from somewhere, and the membrane manufacturer's warranty is 1 year. Now, it gets a little trickier. It's 1 year from when we bought it, right? So we go to our membrane manufacturer and we buy X number of membranes. If it's January and it takes us 3 months to get through those membranes, you might get a system in April that the membrane was purchased in January, right?
Mhm.
And then you're thinking, well, I've got a 1 year warranty on this membrane to the next April. But the manufacturer of the membrane, if you go to them, is going to say, well, we sold that membrane to Tucker on January, so you're out of luck. I mean, the other tricky thing is getting a membrane manufacturer, regardless of who it is, to warranty the item. And so there's so many environmental issues that come into play that it's hard to fault them for having a position of it's difficult to warranty a membrane, right? When it comes to the systems, anything that fails on a frame, right? You have a weld fail, the cart starts rusting out because you're in Florida and everything rusts, right? There's all those kinds of things. Your housing breaks, we're probably going to replace that housing, even though the housing manufacturer doesn't cover that for a year, right? There's a number of different things that we get into from a warranty replacement standpoint when it comes to taking care of the customer. Membranes is obviously the biggest ticket item on those things, and we lean towards the manufacturer to take care of those things for us. And it's rare that it comes up, but sometimes it does. And it's 1 year from when we bought the membrane from the manufacturer is the tricky part. And coming out of COVID and the supply chain issue world that we've all been put in, we're buying stuff that we'll use in 6 to 8 months rather than 6 to 8 weeks, right? So we're overstocked so we don't run out of things, and we can take care of the customer as fast as possible. So just understand, when you're looking at warranties on filtration components, it's not us that made it. It's not us that backs the warranty or not. And, they're looking at it as a year from when they sold it to us as the manufacturer.
All right, cool. Thanks for that clarification. Looks like over on Instagram, SWCC Retail. In Arizona last year, we had 120 degrees several days during the summer. RO membranes were dying young. Is it known that this extreme heat will affect the membranes? Great question.
That's a really good question. So the way that they're made is there's a plastic tube inside, and then there's a lot of glue involved, right? So if you get up to enough heat, you're going to delaminate is the word that has been thrown around in circles when I've had this discussion. So just like if you talk to membrane manufacturers about if you can run hot water through a system, the answer is no. So if your water's getting that hot, or you've got a black hose running across asphalt and it's heating up to 100, 200 degrees before it hits your membrane, obviously there's a risk of delamination to that membrane itself, which is, again, it could be, when we have these scenarios and a customer will say, I've got 6 of your systems and this one's membranes only lasted me a year, and the other 5 last me 3 years and still going. It could be as simple as a job someone took it out on like that, where hot water got introduced one way or another and it just delaminated the membrane itself. And there are ways, if you send us the membrane, that we can send it in and actually have them deconstruct it and figure it out. But most people don't really go through the
Right.
hassle of doing that. It's kind of, okay, well, I better get back to business. Let me get some membranes and get back to work.
Exactly. Yeah, so definitely heat will affect it. If you ever see numbers, we're not too big in publishing numbers. We'll tell people about what to kind of expect performance wise, but with the ideal operating pressure and giving gallons per minute or gallons per day, um, they'll say 700-degree water temp. So you're pushing 120. That's way higher than the normal operating conditions. Another common question that we do get uh, is that somebody might be considering buying a used system. Perhaps they saw it on a local Facebook marketplace or in a lot of these groups. For whatever reason, somebody's getting out of a business. So they got this used system. It seems like a really good deal. But can we explain what are some things that you should be aware of when buying a used system?
Yeah, anytime I get that question, I say you should assume you're going to buy all new filters, right? So, do the math. If it's going to cost you another $700 or $500 or whatever it's going to be to get new filters in there, then you should assume that as part of the purchase price. Anything with a motor or a pump, now it's gotten a little more complicated because you want to have those things tested. A lot of times these aren't local deals, but I would have the person run it, make you a video at the very least showing nothing's leaking, all that kind of stuff, because that could be the next thing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these systems that get sold used haven't been used in quite a long time.
Yeah.
So that's why I get into just assume you need new filters, put that into the budget of the cost, have them run water through it. If they can prove, especially if you're local, that your RO is making good water, well, there's most of your costs right there.
Yep.
But you want to look for leaks. You want to make sure that the pump is pressurizing. Pressure gauges are still working, all that kind of stuff. But the big one is just assume that all the filters are bad and, play it safe from that standpoint.
Yeah, and take a look at the total cost of things. If you are buying it from another location, consider the shipping that's going to get out to you. It's something that we hear about every once in a while. It's shipping your product costs X. Well, we actually get great rates to get it to that point. When you're shipping out yourself, you can probably see just a regular cart that could be five, six, $700, depending on where you're shipping it to. So just those are the things to consider: the filter life and also just getting the product to you.
Yeah, as they say, buy local, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a local person to you, go check it out, see what it's doing, make sure there's no leaks, all that kind of stuff. But assume you got to buy all new filters for sure.
Yeah. Going back to Robert, he's talking about GPM out of your brush with the rinse bar specifically.
Yeah, so I think the max is going to be determined for you by the fittings.
Yeah.
Right. So what's going to happen is if you try and over pressurize or over push water through any of the pneumatic type fittings that everyone's using for connections, it's going to blow them. So the limitation is built into sort of that just kind of capacity that these things have from a practical standpoint. But I don't think you're going to get any more than about a gallon a minute out of a brush that has, let's say, 4 pencil jets and a rinse bar. If you get into some of our larger solar brushes, 20 inches wide with dual rinse bar, now you get into the opposite issue where you might not be able to feed it enough with standard line. So we have a high flow line for that, and you probably need a pump or just a standard DI system to move the volume. But a gallon per minute is about the maximum that I think you can probably get through a standard rinse bar and 4 pencil jets, if you will. And it's likely to blow the fittings before you get much more than that.
Yeah. And even if you could go much higher than that, you got to watch how your spray pattern, whether it's on your jets or your rinse bar, because you don't want water just blasting everywhere. Then you're you might get splashback and get dirty water from maybe it's not next to it. You have stucco that has dirt on it, and now you're splashing back water, so you're just making it more of a mess. So too much can be an issue too. Wow. It's already 4:02 here.
It's about
It's
that time, huh?
6:02 East Coast. Um, Want to check one last? I think that does it for the questions. So we really appreciate all your feedback this week. Good to have a lot of those questions coming in. So just recap of what we covered. Obviously, you can watch this back. We'll keep all these live airings on our channels, whether it's our Facebook business page, which is RHG/Tucker Pole System, our Facebook group page, Tucker/RHG Window and Solar Cleaning Group, and our YouTube channel at Tucker_USA. Just a reminder. So we have our March Madness week sale. This week we had a 15% discount on water fed systems. So that one will last to Friday, I believe. So yeah, if we definitely enjoy your comments, your feedback. If you got questions for upcoming episodes, feel free to let us know those questions, and we'll like to use those in upcoming episodes. So we look forward to, we have one more week, then we'll be out for a bit. So join us next week for episode 5 of Water Fed Wednesday. Have a great week, guys.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.